How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson. A heavy day and way to start the show here. We have a shooting at the Annunciation Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is a Catholic school there. They were in mass. We are still trying to find a lot of information about it. I can tell you what we know so far is 2 children killed. The gunman killed himself, it appears. 5 kids are in critical condition in hospitals, 20 total victims. That is what we know right now as we begin the show. There is a police briefing that is going to be underway here. I'm going to see if I can carry that police briefing for you for the show as we get into this. Police believe the suspect was carrying 3 weapons, a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. 2 children killed, 14 children, 3 adults injured now, according to the police. And we're waiting for other information. I got to say, I'm infuriated with CNN right now because of the level of political agenda being pushed, immediately rushing into gun control. For those of you who pay any attention whatsoever to the issue, this is Evan Perez, a justice correspondent on CNN just a few moments ago.
It seemed like a rifle, he said, a semi-automatic rifle, and it went on for several minutes.
Right, and look, that's not uncommon as well. These things can shoot dozens of bullets, in just one trigger pull, right?
Dozens of bullets in one trigger pull. That's not right. And I wish we could actually deal with the situation without politicizing the situation, but we can't. I want to hop over, see if I can pull up this feed now off of C-SPAN for the what's going on in Minneapolis with the police briefing here, knowing there are kids in surgery right now. Prayers, of course, for them and their families as we deal with the situation. There's still very much unknown the shooter, why, all of these just horrific things that we are learning now as we deal with this tragedy opening the show today, which ironically I intended to begin with dealing with the Democrats' positions on crime, which is just nonsensical. And you know that we're rapidly going to get to a situation now, unfortunately, where we see some level of politicization that is unnecessary for these sorts of situations. And yet people can't help themselves but try to be political because they don't know anything else to do. You don't see a lot of people stopping, praying, or anything. In fact, you see the left going very angry now. I'm already getting people yelling at me on social media from the left that your prayers are insufficient. We need gun control. I should tell you that I am on in Sandy Hook. I am live on the air in Sandy Hook. And those families there know the tragedy of a school shooting with young people. And the level of conspiracy theorizing, the level of politicization, the level of people rushing to solutions that are inapplicable. We don't know the situation here yet, but we know, unfortunately, people rush to trying to get some level of answer, trying to get some level of explanation, and trying to offer solutions that may or may not work. Now, that awful situation in Connecticut where the kid killed his mother and took guns, there was no law short of gun confiscation that could have stopped it. This guy apparently rifle, shotgun, and handgun with him, according to the police reports. Very few of the proposals out there involve handguns. We have the Second Amendment. And unfortunately, part of what happens in these situations is because of where the media is and their political sensibilities, because of where the dominant, loudest voices are and their political sensibilities, unfortunately what happens is we rush immediately into a conversation on those things that can't happen, confiscation of guns in the country because we have a Second Amendment, and we completely ignore the conversation on mental health and the spiritual crisis we have in the country. And it is a spiritual crisis in the country. I think you've got to acknowledge that in the country right now, we do, in fact, have a spiritual crisis. We have a problem in this country where, in particular, young men lost in the world begin to act out. There's a story, it is completely unrelated to this, but it's relevant in this way. There's a story about a major lawsuit that has been filed against ChatGPT. OpenAI is the parent company. Young man in school, lost in the world and depressed, began to contemplate suicide. And the chatbot inside OpenAI was willing to help him figure out how to end his life. He was clearly struggling, and one of the subtexts of the story from the New York Times is that he attempted to hang himself, and his parents never even noticed the rope burn on his neck, or at least that's implied in the story. That he tried to get his parents to see, and they did not see. There are a lot of people in our world who are struggling, and they are invisible to a lot of people. When we rush into these stories about shootings and gun control and what laws can we pass, no law is ever going to keep us safe. And we ignore the spiritual problem. So many of the problems we have in the country today are actually not economic or social problems. They're spiritual problems. There's a spiritual rot in the country. People are off on their own, left to their own devices. They're trying to find answers to those conversations they have in their head. Why am I here? Do I belong? Is there meaning? What is my purpose? And our society these days is programmed to drown out those voices and silence those voices. And so people are left without the answers for the soul side of their person. Our government does a good job to a degree of answering questions for and solving problems with the body of the person, but not the soul of the person. And the institutions that have the answers for the soul of the person are often drowned out in society. And in an interconnected society where we are overly connected, more than we've ever been, we are also more isolated than we have ever been. We isolate ourselves and we convince ourselves that the steady stream of information into our pockets on our devices actually connects us to the rest of the world. And what actually it does is it isolates us from the rest of the world. It actually isolates us from the world. It isolates us from each other. And we are convinced because we are overwhelmed with the information flow that we have relationships and contact and information. And we don't, because there's no real substitute for tactile, face-to-face human conversation and tactile, face-to-face relationship with people. And as we become more isolated and overwhelmed with information, mental health issues are on the rise. Societal decline is on the rise. Violence is on the rise. Young men lost in the world is on the rise. And the government isn't addressing that. In fact, the loud voices want to yell over gun control issues, not mental health issues. The loudest voices in the room want to yell about the solutions that are least likely to take place because there isn't a movement in the country to get 2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the states to repeal the Second Amendment. And yet that's what they decide to argue about, not about are there signs of mental health problems? Are there signs of struggle? Time and time again, we see the recurring pattern of young men, mostly white, picking up firearms, using violence as a way to get attention, killing themselves. Increasingly now, we've had a number of attacks of people in the transgender community doing the same thing. The Covenant shooting in Nashville, among others. There have been multiple ones, more downplayed by the press, given the politics of the situation. There are people struggling with mental health issues out there. And turning to violence to get attention after they feel ignored by their families, ignored by people who they thought were their friends, ignored by society, is their way to get a lot of attention and end it all. And it's not a conversation the politicians are prepared to address. It's not a conversation the media is prepared to address. You know, if you are one of those people who feels lonely and isolated, there are lots of groups out there that would love to plug you in for help in your community, not just churches, lots of nonprofits, lots of places where you can go find some meaning helping other people. We don't know the motive for this person. We don't know if it was terrorism. We don't know if it was mental health. But the pattern tends to be striking, and the conversations that come from the pattern tend to be just as striking. The rush to find political solutions to spiritual problems. Two kids are dead so far. 5 are in surgery. We know they're at local hospitals. 20 total victims. Children's Minnesota treating the 5 children right now. Some of them shot in the head, one shot in the neck. Most of them expected to survive, though we don't know how the conditions. Many people in the area heard the shooting and couldn't believe they were hearing a shooting. There are 72 students, 4 Dominican sisters. Well, back in 1922, Dominican sisters started this Catholic school, opening the doors to 72 students. In the 1960s, there were over 1,000 students. Today, there are 340 students at this school. It enrolls students from pre-K to 8th grade, touting its commitment to academics, service, and Catholic values. Monday was the first day of class. Today was their first Mass. And that Mass began with gunfire. These families in that community could use your prayers. And yeah, you know, prayers do work. And in fact, I suspect these people, these families, this community could use your prayers more than you're yelling about political solutions that may or may not take place. And those children who have died can be comforted by the angels. Not the way you want to start a radio program today. That is the latest that we have. I'll continue to monitor for information as we update this situation. But that is it. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, school shooting, 2 children dead, plus the shooter, 5 kids in critical condition, undergoing surgery, 20 total wounded victims. So, surreal moment for me happening here on the program as I am giving you the latest in Minneapolis. I am getting texts from my kid that there's a possible shooter on her campus, and she and her classmates are barricaded into a classroom, pulling other students in for safety, locking the doors, turning off the lights, contemplating using the bookshelves as a barricade for their classroom. It appears it is a false alarm, she says, and the police are searching the building and moving people out. But it's a little bit of a surreal moment to start the show today while I'm explaining to you the situation in Minnesota and what has been going on. And my kid is texting me at the same time that they're barricaded into their classroom on campus. Appears to be fine. Situation appears to be okay. There appears to be a false alarm. There have been a number of these false alarms in the last few days around college campuses. One was the University of Arkansas, where a boy with a large black golf umbrella was seen, and people mistook his umbrella for an AR-15 and called the police. There appear to be two other college campuses where students on the first day of school called in false reports in order to get class canceled. School is starting and these things happen. And unfortunately, we have one real tragedy in Minnesota. We've now got 7 patients in critical care at a hospital in Minneapolis. And the mayor of Minneapolis has come out. Look, I'll play you the audio. I will play you the audio, but I want to show the guy some grace. This is Mayor Frey from Minneapolis.
And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance.
People are upset with him about these kids were praying. Don't just pray for the kids. That is Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis. Cut him some slack, folks. It's a high-stress, upsetting situation where he is the mayor of that city. I'm not going to blast him for being upset in a situation like that. I do think people diminish the power of prayer, but I also understand his emotional state right now in this city where kids are dead. I would say this, though. This is my frustration. We do see these over and over again. We see it at Parkland. We see it at Sandy Hook. We see it here in Minneapolis. We've seen it in Texas. Seen it here in Georgia. And everyone focuses on the guns. And nothing happens because of our laws and Constitution. And we never really address the mental health issue. And it seems to me that if we address the mental health issue, we would at least be making a dent. You know, of all the gun violence in this country, half are suicides. So if you deal with mental health, you may not stop the school shootings, but you'll have stopped half the gun violence in the country. So maybe if we can't deal with the guns because of the laws, the rules, the regulations, the Constitution, we should come together on mental health issues. Maybe so. I'm just thinking out loud here. Let me tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. We'll move on the rest of the show when we come back. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm, you can buy 3 of them. You can save $200. You can get them for less than $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. You can go there, EdenPureDeals.com, put in the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. And you can get them. They're an air purifier, so they get rid of pollen, they get rid of dust, they get rid of pet dander. They kill 99.9% of bacteria and viruses that float through the device. They also generate ozone that goes out into the room, touches the odors, neutralizes the odors, all odors, smoke odors, litter box odors, dirty diaper odors, pet odors, cooking in the kitchen odors, you name it. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. Get 3 of them upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your travel bag, your RV, wherever you need them. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. What we know so far, we're getting more reports in from the police that 2 children aged 8 and 10 were killed in their church pews. The shooter barricaded the door and then began firing through windows of the church. Just a profoundly evil act. Evil is on the march. I'm going to move on to other stories now because there actually is a lot more to cover today. And I want to say this. I see on social media right now a lot of conservatives going after the mayor of Minneapolis for don't just pray. These kids were praying. It must do something more than thoughts and prayers. And my view is very simple here. It's easy for the keyboard warriors to sit there and attack the mayor, whose city just got attacked by a monster who barricaded kids in a church and began shooting the children through the windows. His emotions are very raw, and I'm just going to show a little more grace than I think a lot of people on social media tend to show in situations like this, understanding that he has a number of dead children on his hands as mayor of that city, and I will leave it there. And if you want to be the one to attack the mayor right now while he's going through this with his city, help yourself, but I just don't want to. Now, what I do want to say, though, is beyond this shooting, I continue to go back to the mayor of Chicago yesterday. And the mayor of Chicago on Morning Joe, and it seems very clear to me, by the way, on Joe Scarborough's show, that he's trying to move the Democrats on crime. I know, and I've got a good relationship with Joe Scarborough, and we don't often agree these days. Years ago, it was 2004, I got asked to go up before MSNBC really went hard left. I mean, they were always on the left, but they weren't that far left. They had Tucker Carlson for a while, Pat Buchanan, Joe Scarborough. They tried to have a balance, and they asked me to come up and blog the election for them. It's how I got my start in the media, writing at MSNBC. I was the one conservative they hired. They hired 3 liberals and me. And I wrote on the GOP side. The liberals were devastated that night, and it was an eye-opening experience for me because I was at MSNBC, a network that at the time was a strategy between Microsoft and NBC. That's where it's got its name, MSNBC. It was a Microsoft NBC news venture with the rise of the internet, and it was kind of a hybrid trendsetter of the day, blending the internet and broadcast news together. And it was an eye-opening experience for me because I knew the press was liberal. But I'm at MSNBC that night. George W. Bush not only wins, but wins a majority of the vote. And producers and reporters were crying. I mean, I knew the media was liberal. I just didn't realize they were that broke. I mean, they were crying. One producer in particular, who was a very nice woman, but she was literally weeping that her daughter was now going to be called up to war. It was wild to me. Like, these people are kind of detached from society, unhinged. And yet there they were. And I met Pat Buchanan. It was kind of funny. So I meet Pat Buchanan. I go up to him because I was a Buchanan fan, and said, "Mr. Buchanan, my name's Eric Erickson. I was hired to blog the election. Joe Trippi is here now from Howard Dean's campaign. He asked me to do it, and I'm the conservative blogging the election." And he looked at me and he laughed. He said, "They didn't know you were conservative, did they?" And I laughed. I said, "Yeah, no, they actually did. I run a political site called redstate.com. That's why they got me." He says, "I bet you're the only one." I said, "As a matter of fact, there are 3 very far on the left and me." He says, "Yep, that's the way it is around here." Now, that was an eye-opening experience, but Scarborough's team kind of took me in. They were at the time. A lot of them were Republicans, had been staffers on the Hill, developed a friendship with Joe. He actually, he and Rush Limbaugh, I always thought it was funny, gave me the exact same advice on why I should go to CNN instead of going to Fox when both of them made me an offer. I went to CNN first, and then I went to Fox. And we don't always see eye to, in fact, very little do we see eye to eye. But I pay attention to Joe Scarborough for this reason, because he still has a lot of friends and family who are on the right. And while he's on MSNBC and he's talking to people on MSNBC, when Scarborough is signaling to the people on MSNBC that, guys, you're too far out there, Scarborough has a very influential audience in Washington, D.C., and not just among the hard left. And when you've got Scarborough signaling that y'all are too far out there on an issue that's alienating to middle America, it's something that Democrats institutionally pay attention to. And so he had on the mayor. I played this yesterday, but I got to play it again for you because it blows my mind. This is Scarborough engaging with the mayor of Chicago on crime in Chicago.
So let me ask you, Mr. Mayor, those all sound like great programs. I'm curious, would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago? Would that help drive down crime?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that. You've talked about the other things you want, and I said those are good and important programs, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful to go along with all of those social programs that a lot of cities are engaging in and having success with?
Well, look, here's the best way I can put it, Joe, is that in the 90s when I was in high school, we had 3,000 more police officers and we had 900 people being murdered every single year in Chicago. It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that
that's not the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, do you believe the streets of Chicago would be safer if you got all of those other extraordinary programs put back into place, which do have a history of being successful, if that's complemented by having 5,000 more cops on the streets of Chicago?
I don't believe that we should narrow it down to just police officers, Joe, is what I'm saying. That is an antiquated approach. I'm saying we've invested in detectives.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important. I just need a yes or a no, and then
He never gets the yes or the no. In fact, this is Brad Todd, a political strategist on the right, with Abby Phillips on CNN last night.
Well, Chicago's long been, and Washington, D.C. have long been the murder capitals of the country.
Yeah, and all those states that I mentioned are more dangerous when it comes to violent crime than Chicago.
If your relative gets killed, you don't care if it's a blue state or a red state. Chicago's had nearly 600 murders a year. When Rahm Emanuel was mayor quite a while ago, it was maybe 400. I think every one of those families in the 600 who were killed last year would like to, maybe the federal government had intervened and helped them back then. Donald Trump also said he wouldn't come in unless the governor asked him, but the governor ought to ask him.
Why won't he go where the governor will ask him?
They haven't asked him. Does anyone think Chicago is safe enough? Is Chicago, but Abby, the question is...
So in Illinois hasn't asked him, but he insists that he's going to go anyway.
Is Chicago
But other states like Tennessee and maybe Ohio, maybe if he said, hey, I'll bring National Guard troops, they're Republicans. Maybe they would say yes, but he hasn't. But you're avoiding the question.
Is Chicago safe enough? Do they need help? Yes, they could use help.
No city is safe enough.
No city is safe enough, she says. So that's the thing, though, is that she doesn't want to answer the question because she knows Chicago's not safe. And the mayor of Chicago can't say that they want more police. And now you've got this group that is funded by the Soros Fund telling Democrats that they need to talk about how they're strong on safety, not tough on crime. And it sounds like a focus group you get within an echo chamber. And it goes back to the mayor of Chicago, who's talking about affordable housing. This, by the way, is one of the talking points from the Soros funded group, is that you should talk about when people say, are you tough on crime? You say, well, I support affordable housing. What does that have to do with crime? Well, if people have houses, they're not likely to commit crime. Really? So you don't want to put police on the streets. You want to put the criminals in houses. They don't have a good message on this. It's insane to me how badly the message is. This is Rachel Bate from Politico on Morning Joe.
I was just looking at a poll yesterday, or I guess the day before when I was writing this piece, found that 70% of Americans thought crime was just as bad right now as it had been in recent years, or is actually getting worse. And something like 20% actually thought it was coming down. So when you think about voters and how they feel right now, Trump is really leaning in and sort of latching onto those fears, changing the subject away from things like Medicaid cuts or, the midterms being a referendum on him. He's trying to move it back to crime. And I mean, you asked panelists, does he have the authority to do this, to go to Chicago, to put the National Guard in New York? I would contend that it's not about winning this fight. It's about the fight itself. He wants to be the one to tell voters, I'm tough on crime. What are you going to do? And what Democrats are doing right now is saying, oh, you don't have the authority and crime is down. That doesn't resonate with people. You have to have specific solutions about how you're going to protect their communities.
Exactly. And the Democrats aren't listening. In fact, Michael Thomasy, who is a progressive on Morning Joe as well, listen to this.
We don't have a crime crisis in this country. We have a crime problem in this country.
We don't have a crime crisis. We have a crime problem. The people who are the victims of crime think there's a crisis. The families at this Catholic school in Minneapolis think there's a crisis. There is a crisis for people affected by crime. It's wild to me that the Democrats really can't understand that being tough on crime is good. And why is that? It's it's important that you understand this point. And some of you are going to disagree with me. And I need you to know, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I actually think you're wrong if you disagree with what I'm about to tell you. I actually don't think the Democrats are wanting to be on the side of criminals. And I know some of you think that because they're your political enemies. You don't like them. You think they're the bad guys. No, here's ultimately the problem for the Democrats on why they can't be tough on crime. It's because their major financial contributors are privileged, wealthy, white people who aren't affected by crime. And in their paternalistic racism that these wealthy white people have, like the Soros family, they think that you're targeting poor black men and black people and that it's racism. They have internalized, these wealthy donors to the Democratic Party, that the system is systemically racist, and they view themselves as the white virtue saviors of the black families, and their money comes with strings attached to the Democratic Party that you can't be tough on crime, because if you're tough on crime, that hurts black people disproportionately, and that proves there's racism, and you can't be racist. It all comes from the moneyed interest of the wealthy elite who control the Democratic Party. That is the problem the Democrats are having to grapple with right now, is that so much of their money and their progressive base funded by that money has internalized that cracking down on crime is inherently racist. And these are all privileged white people who are unaffected by crime, and they cannot appreciate that the black moms and black dads who can't live in their wealthy neighborhoods because they can't afford it actually want to be safe at night. The privileged, wealthy, white elites are the racists they tell you about. They just don't look in the mirror and see themselves as the racist. They see the people cracking down on crime as the racist, because why? Disproportionately, a lot of crime, particularly in urban areas, happens by non-white people, particularly young black men. As a result, it's the young black men getting arrested. As a result, it's prima facie evidence of racism to these broken-brained, elitist white snobs. That is why the Democratic Party cannot say they're tough on crime, because they would lose money from their privileged donor class that actually is in charge of directing public policy for the Democrats. They have handed their public policy over to these wealthy elites like Alex Soros, who has bodyguards and lives a very lavish lifestyle, and he's very secure, and he doesn't have to live in the inner city. He's not serenaded by gunshots at night, and he thinks that if you want to crack down on that, what you want to do is target black people, therefore you're racist. It is the burden of being a wealthy white progressive to believe that everyone else is racist except you yourself. Hoax call at my kids' school. They are just now, looks like they're being cleared building by building at my kids' school. They've been barricaded in to a classroom. And this situation in Minneapolis, I'm seeing accusations about the shooter online. And if they are true, they fit a very disturbing pattern that the media is probably going to change the subject on very quickly. And I bet many of you understand what I'm talking about when I say that. And again, it's rumor mill stuff. It's a lot of rumor mill stuff on social media, but YouTube just removed a video, and that video suggests this person was taking credit for it, and this person is, well, confused, apparently self-inflicted suicide after killing kids at yet another Christian school. This is becoming a pattern of, if this stuff pans out, targeting Christian schools by these particular types of shooters. I'm going to let this play out before I go down, because oftentimes the internet rushes to things, but there appears to be growing credible evidence that possibly there is a trans issue involved in this shooting at this church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And of course, if that's the case, you're going to watch a conversation rapidly change in real time in the press. Now, speaking of great colleges out there, Hillsdale College is a great one, and they're offering to show you how great they are by allowing you to take some of their classes at no charge to you in a series of video lectures. You've got 40 classes to choose from. All the lectures are about 30 minutes long, but then they're episodic, and it depends on what class you take, how many episodes there are. So some are 12, some are 10, some are 7, some are 14, and they're great, though, because they cover the gamut from economics to math to chemistry to philosophy to religion to political science to literature. A lot of great history stuff in there. That you can take a history capitalism class, a study on the Federalist Papers, one on citizenship, one on Shakespeare, C.S. Lewis, and no charge to you. All you do is go to ericforhillsdale.com today, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. You sign up at no charge. If you go right now to ericforhillsdale.com, you'll see their great class on the Federalist Papers, and it really is great. I learned a lot there about the writings of the Federalist Papers. They're still cited by the Supreme Court on what is and isn't constitutional in the country. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today. Sign up with Hillsdale College, and you can start opening your mind and get smarter with Hillsdale College.